Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel a couple of hours after the British Grand Prix. And I don't know, it was one of those weekends where it had that feeling like something was going to happen. And then Silverstone delivered. Like, I should never discount Silverstone as one of the best races of the week, of the Formula One calendar. And we are joined by Mr. V's, I always say garage, but I don't know, his garage. You know what I mean?
It's garage where I come from, but I'm very posh, so that's I think I sound less posh to videos. Anyway, my name's just Mr. V. Garage is not my name.
No.
Hello, how's it going?
But yeah, thank you for coming on the channel, mate. And I mean, what a race to have to come and talk about. You know, sometimes there's a little bit of filler in these episodes, I'm not going to lie.
True.
But there was enough to talk about during this British
I don't think we've got
Prix.
enough time. We're going to be here till midnight. Like that was crazy. What a race. There's something about Silverstone. Silverstone seems to always have a pretty crazy race. There's something about that track that just like encourages crazy strategies. They're doing rain dances in the pits clearly because it's never dry. It was great, just fantastic.
No, I completely agree. I don't know what it is about Silverstone. Like, even in seasons where you're like, this might be a little bit boring, it comes up with something. It's got that feel of kind of the Brazilian Grand Prix as well. I feel like they're on that same kind of level. They've done something in designing that track that makes it just work for Formula One. And particularly for Lewis Hamilton. I mean, talk about Brazil and the Great British Grand Prix. He's won a lot of both. 9 wins now in Britain. Were you expecting Lewis Hamilton to come out of nowhere and pick up a victory this weekend?
In a way, it wasn't. It's never that surprising. It's never that surprising when he wins in Silverstone. As you said, he's won 9 now. Yeah. you can never count him out. He's won what, like half of all of them that he's raced, something like that.
Yeah, it must be.
You can never count him out. Who's starting front row? Clearly, that Mercedes, they figured something out a few races ago. I kind of was expecting it. That feels weird to say. That feels like British bias. But no, it just kind of had a feeling like something like that was going to happen.
I mean, there were 3 British drivers starting in the top 3. So
yes,
British bias was heavy in Silverstone this weekend.
Crofty gave out a fact, and the last time that happened at any race was in 1968. Which is crazy if you consider like how many British drivers we've basically always had in Formula One.
Yeah,
they've never lined up 1, 2, 3 for what is that 58 years.
I mean, and then if there's going to be one that wins it, it's going to be Lewis, isn't it?
That's the thing. You never bet against Lewis. It
was so strange as well because just kind of coming into the Grand Prix to take it all the way back to the start. A lot of the talk was George or Norris. I was like, George Russell starting from pole position has been probably that little bit quicker than Lewis Hamilton. I mean, you look at the standings before the race, he's got a considerable gap to his teammate. Lewis Hamilton seemed to kind of be in one of those seasons again where he was changing lots of bits and pieces. And then Lando Norris starting in 3rd place. It was like, well, Lando Norris has been really close in Spain, really close in Austria. Surely he'll be the one. But as you say, 9-time winner for a reason. In a race where it is, I can't remember who said it post-race, but they said it was like a racer's race. You know what I mean? You had to be able to do everything right. You had to be able to sort out your tires, make sure you're on the right strategy, put in those performances when you needed to, kind of balance the slicks even when you were heading into intermediate territory, balance the intermediates even when you were heading into slick territory. And if there's one driver you want, it's, well, the driver who's won the most races ever in Formula One. And, well, the second most experienced driver on the grid, because I don't know how Fernando Alonso is just still kicking about.
He's a cyborg. There's no blood in his body. It's just engine oil. But yeah, absolutely. Like, in any race, a transition from dry to wet or back again is always tough. And it separates, the good drivers from the great drivers. We had that 4 times in this race. Yeah. And so as I said, it's a racer's race. It really shows that pure racing instinct almost. It's not even like intelligence. There's something almost like magical about it. And we saw Hamilton and also Verstappen coming through.
Yes.
Far beyond expectations. And it just shows that I think those two are still in like strong discussion to be the 2 best on the grid. I would say.
Yeah, in
Like
terms of
Norris is quick, but he's not pushing for those calls on the team. He's not pushing for the tire strategy.
it's that raw talent, as you say, like that raw ability to just be able to judge the car absolutely perfectly. And we'll get to McLaren, we'll get to Lando Norris, and I think he was just, well, one lap away from judging it to the extent that Lewis Hamilton did, came in that lap later and didn't quite get there. But I do think we should touch upon George Russell before we get there, because the teammate to Lewis Hamilton, as I said, has been having probably a better season than Lewis Hamilton. Won in Austria, was kind of the man to step through the door when Verstappen and Norris decided to
somehow
smash into one another. It was maybe an unjustified win in Austria. And then maybe just a reminder that George Russell isn't quite there yet for me. Just the fact that even before he had the technical issue, he had dropped all the way back to 4th place. He was overtaken by his teammate, overtaken by Piastri, overtaken by Norris, dropped behind Verstappen in the pit stops. Like, it all just didn't quite add up for George, even though he started from pole.
Yeah. He wasn't quite handling when the track was when it's just starting to drizzle, getting a bit greasy, and Lewis caught up to him 2 seconds in 1 lap or 2 laps. So yeah, he's quick, he's phenomenal, but this is a race you can't plan for, and you just need that superhuman talent and experience and otherworldly instinct for something like that.
Yeah, and George, well, I kind of want to get your opinion on this, because I've asked a few people throughout the season, depending on whether it's an Austria where he comes out with a victory, or a Canada where he was on pole position, but again, didn't quite have the pace to win the race. How are you feeling about George Russell going into next season, being that Mercedes number 1? Well, we don't know who's going to be alongside him next. It's looking more and more like Kimi Antonelli, so you'd expect George Russell to be the number 1.
I would say Russell, he's strong enough to be a team number 1. He's comparable. I would say maybe not quite as good as Norris, but comparable to someone like a Norris, comparable to a Leclerc or a Sainz. Like, in almost any team, you would have no problem saying he's a number 1. Obviously, he's currently partnered with one of the greatest drivers to ever do it. But I think you take Lewis out, it won't feel like Mercedes is lacking. Well, at least in that one car. It depends who they put in the second car. I don't think it'll feel like they're lacking all that much. He's been better, realistically, over the season. He's scored more points. He's got more poles. I think he's winning in the pole battle and the race battle.
Yep.
All of these. So I think George is doing amazingly well, to be honest.
Yeah, statistically, George Russell, the better driver. Just on today, Lewis Hamilton is the difference there. Has that little bit of maybe, well, experience mixed with talent, mixed with just Lewis Hamilton's innate ability to be able to get a lot out of a Formula One car. And that's why he has stuck around for so long. He's won so many races, won so many championships. And on that same kind of note, you mentioned Verstappen on par with Lewis Hamilton in terms of that kind of ability to just rinse out a result. It was another one of those where I was like, Red Bull, they seem like maybe, they're finally fallible. Maybe we're going to see like Max Verstappen really drop off. He was running in 5th place. He was like 7 seconds off 4th. It was like, wow, this might be like a really poor race from Verstappen, finally. And then he somehow finishes 2nd. And it's like, how on earth does he just keep doing it? He just, every single weekend, doesn't matter whether the Red Bull is quick or slow, he's always up there. Like, he never has a weekend where it seems like he's, well, we'll get to Charles Leclerc, for instance. He never seems to have a weekend where it all goes catastrophically wrong.
No, I can't remember the last time that particularly Max had a bad strategy call. Every single strategy call is always perfect. It's always the exact perfect lap to change onto Inters, let's say. It's always perfect. It's like, it's robotic. And clearly the Red Bull strategy team is very good. I would say probably the best in the sport currently. But it's not all team. Some of it is from the driver, particularly decisions to transition off like wet tires. That's on the driver. Verstappen always calls it perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, he came, I think it was the second time they came off Inters, and he did it 1 lap earlier than Lando.
Yeah, he went in. He was like first of that kind of bunch.
Yeah, and it just clearly was perfect. Like, completely infallible. It's going to be a long time, I think, until we start to see Red Bull dropping the ball in those kind of situations.
I don't know. They long pit stop in Austria kind of opened the door to Lando Norris a little bit, but I know what you mean. Generally speaking, like if you're going to back a team to just absolutely nail it, it's going to be Red Bull. Like they're just known for that. Everything off track or on track, kind of everything pit lane related. It just feels like Red Bull are still head and shoulders above everybody else. And then when you add in the fact that you've got Max Verstappen in your car and he can be the difference maker as well, it just seemed like that perfect combination between Max and Red Bull is at least continuing to show and still extends his lead in the Drivers' Championship. And it's like, as much as there's talk around, McLaren looking quick, Mercedes coming back into the fray a little bit, Ferrari were quick towards the beginning of the season. Is anyone ever going to get close to Max Verstappen in terms of points? He just keeps picking up as many points as he needs to just continue to extend that championship lead.
I think basically he's so quick and the strategy is so good. It's only going to happen when a team significantly outdesigns Red Bull. Like, it looks like McLaren now has the quicker car by a fraction, but I don't think anyone's going to beat him over a championship until they have a significantly better car. We need to get back to, like pre-2021 when he was in like the third best car.
Yeah.
And he still came
third
or second in the championship. Like, he's still going to be right up there until other teams are bringing like insanely rapid cars to beat him with. So, to answer your question, no, not this year.
Max Verstappen still winning the championship. I mean, leading the championship by still a significant margin over everybody else. And it's...
Yeah, he's got, what, like 100 points or more? Maybe like 80 points to Lando. Yeah.
He just continues to dazzle, does Max Verstappen. And I think he kind of had a little bit of a wry smile after the Grand Prix. I think he knew, especially because he'd made a little mistake in qualifying himself. And it was like, did a little bit of damage to the car, still managed to put it fourth on the grid. Again, another showing of just, even in a damaged Red Bull, he still pulls it out of the bag and puts it close enough to the front end that he's still fine. And then he kind of looked at Lando and I think knew on the day Lando Norris probably should have beaten him. But one of those things that if it doesn't go your way, kind of falls in the other favor. And Lando Norris, just to kind of round out the top three, surely the most disappointed of the drivers on the grid. Again, it feels like just like, I know he got that win in Miami, but it does feel like Spain probably had the faster car. Had they got it right? Like I feel like Spain, at least Max Verstappen was like the difference maker, and the Red Bull strategies. Like they were just stunning in terms of their decision making. Red Bull when it came to Spain, Austria was interesting. That's sort of the other side of the coin with Max Verstappen, isn't it? In Austria, and then here in Silverstone, Lando Norris was leading, got to the front of the pack, but couldn't hold on to it.
Yeah. The look on Norris's face when he got out the car, he is not a happy man currently. As you said, could have won in Spain, should have won in Austria, really. Like, he was quicker, significantly quicker. Also, probably should have won today. Like, that McLaren car was the quickest car today. And in that final stint, Piastri on the correct tyres, on those medium tyres, was the fastest car out there. Like, Lando knows this. He could be a 4-time winner as of this afternoon, and he's just dropped 3 in a row, like 3 back to back to back. He's not a happy man, and he knew it in that cool down room.
I think that's the main thing, isn't it? It's now becoming a pattern. It's becoming 3 in a row. It's becoming like he should have. And it was kind of similar actually towards the end of last year. I suppose it was slightly different in that Max Verstappen's Red Bull was still absolutely clear. But Lando Norris was kind of picking up continual second place finishes. And the excuse then was just, well, the Red Bull is just ridiculously fast. Like there's no reason that the McLaren should be catching Max Verstappen anyway. Whereas you look at it like this year, now the McLaren seems to edge the Red Bull just in terms of pace, especially race pace. Towards the end of the stint as well, you could see it. Like Lando Norris, 15, 16 laps in on that medium tyre towards the beginning of the race, suddenly the McLaren just seems to find another gear. I don't know what it is, that they've got something in their tyre strategy and something in their tyres right now where it is right at the end of that first or second stint on the tyres. They do seem to just find that little extra tenth, close the gap, got to the lead of the race. And then it comes back to, I think this is something that we've had from Lando Norris. You could go all the way back to Russia in 2021 when he probably should have won that race. It was wet. Yeah. He didn't come in. He was a lap too late. And it was the same thing again. You know, he was on the radio. Should the McLaren team have maybe pushed him a little bit harder to come in that lap earlier rather than giving Lando Norris that decision-making in the car? I think it's so hard for them because they're a team that, let's face it, aren't used to being right at the front, at least in this iteration of McLaren. You know, you can go back and say they're a championship-winning team, yes, but nobody who works at McLaren now was really there when they were winning races consistently.
I think that is partially it. Like, we think of McLaren as this like front-running team, a winning team, but they haven't been for 12 years. Yeah. Something like that.
Thanks for rubbing it in. Yep.
Just noticed your jumper. As you say, like lots of the people who work at that team, the majority of the people at that team were not there the last time they were consistently winning races. And strategy is different at the very front. Like, you know, when you're third, strategy is kind of easy. You just kind of follow who's ahead. You can be more reactionary. You can push them with the undercut. If you're leading a race, it's completely different. Like, you have to have the confidence to make these decisions with no clues from cars ahead of you. And we were saying before that, you know, drivers can make the difference. Like Verstappen made the difference calling when he went back onto dry tires.
Yeah.
But that comes one or two times. McLaren now seems to have a consistent failing with its strategy.
Yes.
It's affecting Lando. It's affecting Oscar even more. Like, Oscar could have won this race, and instead he finished, fifth? Like, that team needs to start answering some questions. It needs to start asking themselves some questions, should I say, and it needs to start changing some things on its strategy.
Yeah, that is very true. Kind of looking at Oscar Piastri as well. If you look at, he ended up just behind Lando Norris, but by a considerable margin. You know, you look at, he was right up behind Lando, almost took the lead. I think he was within DRS range of his teammate. They were leading 1-2. And then they leave Oscar out a lap too long as well on the slick tyres. I think the thing for me for Oscar there was maybe just a little bit of, he didn't, so Oscar Piastri for me, I think he just needed a little bit of guidance from the team in that what Russell did behind Hamilton was dropped back just enough so that they could double stack. Whereas Oscar was literally underneath Lando Norris's rear wing.
Yeah, that's
true. Then Lando Norris peels off into the pits and, well, they can't double stack from that point because Oscar is so close to Lando Norris that he'd have just been stationary in the pit lane for 3, 4, 5 seconds. And that, you can't quite get away with that. You need that momentum kind of coming into the pits and out of the pits. And for me, Oscar left it a lap too late. And another big decision goes against McLaren, and another possible victory falls by the wayside. And it's just, I feel like those are the three, right? Russell, Piastri, and Norris will all be looking at Lewis Hamilton lifting that trophy and being like, that should have been me.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that up and down the grids this evening. Like, a lot of people kind of like failed so that Lewis could win this.
Yeah. That's not to take away from Lewis's victory. No. I'm just saying there were other teams.
That is racing. That's how it goes sometimes. And,
yeah, exactly.
You know, every race is a race of attrition, and you have to make the least mistakes, and sometimes that's who wins.
How do you feel about Oscar Piastri? I was just going to kind of, like, as a McLaren fan, I feel like I slightly see it from a biased perspective. I understand the shortcomings of Oscar Piastri and the fact that he isn't quite there with his tires yet, but you know, within the McLaren sphere that I live, it is very much like Oscar Piastri is a future world champion, is going to win races, is going to, like, if Lando Norris doesn't, then Oscar is like the next sort of will battle for a championship, maybe win a championship for McLaren. Outside of that, how do you rate Oscar Piastri amongst the grid right now? Do you think he's got that ability to kind of get there?
I could see it. Like he's obviously incredibly quick. Maybe he doesn't hold his tires. He doesn't hold the life in his tires quite as well as Lando. But there's lots of races like today. If he had been pitted on the right lap, he lost, I think it was 22 or 23 seconds by staying out that lap, and he finished 18 behind the lead. So he could well have won it. And a similar thing in Austria. He had obviously a penalty in qualifying, and I think he had a slightly messed up pit stop as well. If he hadn't had those, he would have won the race when Max and Lando crashed, or even he would have been there with them racing on track. He seems to have a thing, and even though he doesn't hold those tires, he always just seems to be there, and he always seems to be one of the quickest cars on track. Mm-hmm. I could easily see Oscar being world champion material like next year, honestly, but in the next few years. He, for a second year driver, he is extremely impressive. This might annoy some people, but I think Oscar now is better than Lando was at the same time in his career. I would say.
Yeah. I think it's so difficult to judge that kind of thing, isn't it? Because I was having this discussion about Lando Norris versus George Russell and like their shortcomings. And I was kind of making the argument that actually putting him in a Williams where he was just driving around by himself for 90% of the time probably then led to a few of those issues that we've seen with George Russell, where when he is in the mix, he sometimes has a knock with somebody, or, you know, Singapore last year, put under a bit of pressure, knocks into a barrier. And it's like, if he would have been like Lando Norris has been in like a midfield car throughout pretty much his entire career, maybe you don't quite see those mistakes in the same way. And then I suppose Oscar's got that now, right? Like Oscar Piastri's come in. Okay, the McLaren for his first 10, 15 races was pretty abysmal, but since then has been right in and amongst it, in the pack, fighting with the Ferraris, fighting with the Mercedes cars. And I think you almost need that school of hard knocks in Formula One. You learn as you go, and by being in the mix, you get more experience, and therefore, when it comes up, you know how to battle that bit better.
It's a tough one because obviously the ideal scenario is you throw someone into a front-running team and they're immediately one of the best drivers for it. Think of Hamilton's rookie season, think of Max as soon as he got to Red Bull. But there does seem to be a big risk in Formula One that if you put someone into a front-running team too early, or even just, should I say, not when they're not ready for it, they crumble under the pressure. Think of basically everyone else who's been at Red Bull in the last 10 years. Yeah. Like, they put Albon there too early, crumbled under the pressure. Clearly, he's a good driver, but he just could not handle it. But Red Bull, same thing with Gasly, even same thing with Perez now. Like, he just can't hack it. And so I think that's a risk when you're bringing a complete rookie in. If you chuck them in a front-running team, that it will just crush them. They'll lose that confidence. You need confidence to race. Like, speed is 50% skill and 50% self-belief sometimes. So putting them at the back of the grid is a safe bet. They're going to trundle around, you know, they might get in some instance, but really they're not being pressured. The pressure being at the front, they're not getting the same media pressure as well. You put them in the Williams, even if you have the worst race you've ever had, people are like, oh, that wasn't great.
Yeah, but they don't have the same, like, they've cost the team X, Y, Z.
Well, yeah, look at Perez. Look what happens when he makes any mistake at all.
Yeah.
And there's like thousands of news stories immediately. It's a different pressure. I guess the ideal scenario would be sticking them in the middle of the grid. Yeah. But you don't always have that option. And you don't even know who's going to be the middle of the grid.
No, really. Yeah, especially this season.
So much nowadays.
Yeah. It's already swapped about so much in the 12 races that we've had in that middle of the pack. As you say, like, it's pretty much impossible to judge. And actually, I've gone a little bit of tangent. I do want to get to Sergio Perez because you mentioned him. But as you were saying that, the instant thing that came to my mind when you were saying putting a rookie in a big team was Kimi Antonelli. Because he's, still looking like he's going to take that Mercedes seat. Toto Wolff's kind of said, not like he's hinted towards it. He's still continuing his Mercedes program. Obviously, after the summer break, he'll be eligible for a super license, although the super license rules have slightly changed to fit Kimi Antonelli in a little bit.
I think he's eligible now.
He's eligible now, yeah. He wasn't at the beginning of the season, but they've changed the rules so that it's like 17 and you've got enough experience and something else. So he is eligible now. I think we will see him, in free practice sessions for the Mercedes team this season.
It feels like they're working up to it. Obviously, Mercedes pushed to get that rule changed where now it's 17 with considerable experience in a similar car. James Vowles in a press conference this weekend, I think it was on Friday, said that if Sargent doesn't improve, we may look to a driver swap this season.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be saying that if he wasn't having meetings behind the scenes with Toto Wolff.
Yeah, he knew
what that would look like with Antonelli. So it really feels like they're planning for that. Honestly, as you're alluding to, I think Antonelli into Mercedes is a bad idea. Like that Mercedes looks like it's going to be quick for next year.
Yeah.
I imagine they'll be okay in 2026. Impossible to predict. He's not like a superstar breakout F2 driver. He's won 0 races, I think, sprint or feature races.
He won a sprint this weekend.
He won the sprint. I didn't watch it, to be
honest. But yeah, first kind of notable big performance only came this weekend.
He's not ready to be in the Mercedes.
I think it was different. I think it was different 10 races ago. You look at the Mercedes at the beginning of the season. If it's a Mercedes car that, is kind of petering around 4th, 5th fastest, and they're not really touching the podium places overly often, I think then you can kind of put him in.
Yeah, I agree.
There's enough sort of, well, the car isn't good enough that even if he has a bad race or two, it's fair enough. Now the Mercedes is looking like top 3, is winning back-to-back races. If he goes in there and he's expected to perform podium, get top 5 every single week, that's a very different pressure to getting top 10 every week.
Yeah. Now that Mercedes is at the front, I can't in good faith say that it's a good idea to put a rookie in that Mercedes for next year. Which
then begs the question, who would you have? Because I've asked this to a few different guests. They kind of swung in different directions as to who they would have. Obviously, we know Alonso's been signed. Albon's been signed now. They were kind of in the discussion, although Formula One contract isn't really worth the paper it's on, is it?
No, exactly. Yeah, it could be Verstappen for all we know.
Yeah.
Of the people it looks reasonable, like reasonable free agents, I think you would have to say Sainz. I don't think there's anyone like readily available.
Yeah.
Who is stronger than Sainz?
No, he's the best driver available. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say he's one of the best drivers full stop. I think Sainz has been like criminally underrated through his career. I'd say he's top 5 in the sport right now. He deserves to be in a top team. He's obviously, if Ferrari didn't get the opportunity to take Lewis, he would still be there absolutely, like he deserves to be in Ferrari. I think they'd be silly not to take him, but they have reasons. They have other reasons for taking drivers. It's not just about pace.
I know. Carlos Sainz seems like the first choice for everybody at the moment. It's like Williams are in discussion with him. Alpine have suddenly come into the fray as well. Obviously, Audi have been first in the line for the entire time, knocking on the door, but still not getting a final contract signed. Yeah, it's getting towards the summer break now as well, so it's going to be interesting. But we've gone on a little bit of a detour there because I was going to ask you about, well, Christian Horner said himself, you look at the top of the standings right now, we've got Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, 2 McLarens. You'd assume, George Russell would have been in there. So it would have been 2 McLarens, 2 Mercedes, not 2 Red Bulls. Sergio Perez had another, and it feels like I'm saying this every weekend now, another bad weekend. Like, it's just, I don't know what happens to him. He starts the season so well, it gets to Monaco, and he just falls off a cliff. Like, it's the second season in a row where that's happened now.
He started the season fine, I would say.
Yeah.
basically as soon as he re-signed, as soon as he got that new
Also
contract,
that, yeah.
off a cliff. You definitely see in lots of drivers before they sign a contract seems to be some of the best driving you ever get from people because they have that, got to earn a contract pressure on them. As soon as he signed, it's just been I'm trying to think of like non-expletive words to describe it. It's not good. It's not good. What he did in qualifying yesterday, it was not great, but then it was then made even worse by the fact that Verstappen went off in the exact same place for the exact same reason and held it and didn't beach the car. And then you look back at Perez and it's like, come on, man. So like clearly it's possible. Yeah.
Like, do you think, obviously the discussion is going to be, and as you said, because Sergio Perez is in the front-running team in Formula One right now, the microscope is on him every single weekend. And any tiny slip-up is, pointed out. Like, even when he finishes 6th or 7th, a lot of the time he comes under a lot of criticism. But when he's finishing 16th, it's like, it's then becoming not just like a problem, but like a dramatic problem. And as you say, beaching the car, throwing away qualifying, starting from the pit lane, and then I don't know. Do you blame him for the strategy? Red Bull for the strategy? It was like they just went on the inters about 5 laps too early, and it was just a really strange call.
They were just gathering data for Max. Like, there's no strategy. You start from the pit lane. The grid is now competitive enough where Red Bull is not, a minute faster than everyone else. If you start Red Bull in the pit lane, they're not scoring points unless something like crazy happens. So he was just there as a guinea pig, gathering data for Max up ahead, I think.
Yeah, I suppose actually they started him on the hard compound tire and then put Max on the hard compound tire at the end. So maybe it was just that. It was just like, oh, okay, we've seen that the hard compound tire with Perez is better than maybe the medium was on Max at the first stint, and that's why they went for the hard compound tire at the end. So they definitely used him. But again, can he get away with being a guinea pig, especially when the constructor standings is narrowing? You look at, okay, they've still got a 60 or so point gap to Ferrari in second place, and we'll get to them. But McLaren are closing that gap to Ferrari. Mercedes are now also looking like they're going to pick up consistent points. And it's just like, when does that become a problem? When does the fact that Sergio Perez is probably going to finish 8th in the driver's standings on this like form, and also maybe get to the point where Red Bull are actually under pressure in the constructors? Is there a decision to be made
now? It's a problem now. But even as you said, if he was coming 6th every race, that's also a problem. Like, Red Bull does not have the luxury. They are not going to win all the remaining races. Like, there's going to be races where Max is behind Norris, and there's going to be races where Max is behind Norris and Piastri. And so they need their second driver to at least be coming 4th, like right next to Max. They can't afford to be throwing away whatever it is, an extra 10 points that Perez should be picking up, because what'd you say that gap was? 80 points?
Let's have a look. 71 points to Ferrari.
Okay, but we've got what? 12
it's half the season. So we're only halfway through the season. And then McLaren are only 7 points off Ferrari. So it's like 78 points to McLaren.
Yeah. So I think, like, you can't afford your second driver to be picking up basically 0. Even if Max wins every race and Norris and Piastri coming 2nd and 3rd, that's still... can't do that maths that quickly, but I think basically that puts them about level at the end of the season, right?
Yeah, probably.
It's something like that. But they have a Perez problem now. And I think the fact that we've now been seeing some media headlines talking about, break clauses in this contract, exit like performance-based clauses. Those kind of things only come out if Red Bull wants it to come out. Yeah. There's no reason that anyone would know what's in this contract unless someone at Red Bull was telling journalists.
Letting them know.
They're leaking those for a reason, to put pressure on, and to put pressure on, his team, his managers and stuff. Because clearly they see this problem, and they're now having discussions about, should we drop him end of this year or even during this year?
It would be very Red Bull, wouldn't it? They haven't dropped a driver yet this season. They love to drop one. Like, they haven't got a Nick DeVries to throw under the bus. So.
I was gonna say they can't go a season without like changing at least one of those 4 seats. So
it shouldn't be Yuki, bless him. Daniel Ricciardo.
He's doing great.
Well, I mean, Daniel Ricciardo might be the swap, right? Is that the thing? Would you be Daniel Ricciardo in Red Bull?
Oh, I'd put Yuki in. Well, actually, they're looking similar at the moment. Daniel is the popular choice. I think Yuki probably would pick up a couple more points on current form, but it would be close. So really, you could do either. Long term, I think it makes sense to promote Yuki because why have him in the second team if you're not going to put him in a first team at some point?
Yeah.
So I would take Yuki, but Red Bull has multiple options.
Yes.
They have those two. They've got the pulling power. They could take Sainz if they wanted, and probably that's one of the reasons that Sainz hasn't signed yet, is because he knows that there is a chance Perez is going to be booted.
Yeah,
so
those seats.
He's holding on for that news, I would imagine. But also, like, they've got significant options in Formula 2. They can have any driver they want.
Yeah. Well, when you're leading the Constructors' Championship, when you've won however many Constructors' Championships on the bounce, you're a pretty good-looking seat. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They're not like a Stake Sauber where they're kind of running around at the back of the pack. Like, can we just get a driver in? Has anyone got a driver going spare that we can just pop into a car for next season? Like, doesn't feel that way. Well, on that note, actually, I do want to mention Nico Hulkenberg before we get to the Ferraris, because I do think Nico Hulkenberg was the fastest Ferrari car this weekend, despite Carlos Sainz finishing in front. Hulkenberg, just absolutely electric right now. I don't know if I've got enough positive words to describe Nico Hulkenberg. He just seems on the opposite of that. Like, he's got his contract for next year into 2026 as well with Audi, and just seems to be like, well, yeah, I'm just going to continue to be the best driver in the midfield just because I can.
He was amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, the first Ferrari-powered driver in qualifying.
Yeah.
Only finished 8 seconds behind Sainz, which should not be possible in a Haas. So clearly means he was doing something well, phenomenally well. And obviously, he signed with Stake Sauber, but as you say, contracts are not worth all that much in Formula 1. He's putting in such a good performance. I mean, we're talking about replacements for Hamilton, like Hugo's in the second Mercedes. Why not take a German driver who's driving pretty quick currently? It would be a popular choice.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I could definitely see it happening. Like, you look at the driver standards now, he's sort of getting to that point. He's just overtaken Yuki Tsunoda in terms of that position. I was kind of looking at Yuki Tsunoda started the season as that best of the rest driver. I think that is now clearly Nico Hulkenberg. Like, the fact that he's finished 2 races in a row in 6th place. And that just didn't seem fathomable at the beginning of the season, because we had 4 teams that were ridiculously quicker than everyone else. Like, it seemed like the top 4 was pretty much set. Then it was like, okay, if you can finish in the top 8, you're doing an amazing job, because you have to displace one of those. The fact that he's finished 6th twice, it's just like absolutely mind-boggling to me, and puts himself like 11th in the standings. He's 1 point behind Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Little bit of a gap to Fernando Alonso ahead in the standings, but still, Nico Hulkenberg's absolutely on it. Do you feel like Haas, obviously the big news around Haas this weekend was Ollie Behrman. Do you think they'll be absolutely gutted that they haven't got a Behrman-Hulkenberg lineup? Because that just seems perfect to me.
I think so. That would have been a... Well, I don't know if it would be a strong lineup, because Behrman is, again, he's not setting Formula 2 on fire. He's good, he's dependable, but again, he's not like a Piastri. Well, we haven't seen it yet, at least. I think they'll be sad they've lost Hulkenberg, to be honest, because he is driving easily top 6-7 performances of the entire grid. So yeah, Haas must be kicking themselves, particularly because Hulkenberg's been doing great, but Haas has been coming along. Like, Magnussen also is putting in some decent finishes. That Haas car is getting quicker. It seems that after Steiner left, they've been a lot more dependable. They've been a lot more consistent. They're just like, they're at the back, they've got their heads down, and they're just slowly building a decent midfield car. They've been getting quicker, and they currently have a driver who can really capitalize on that. It's a big loss to lose Hulkenberg.
Huge loss. And that's why I compare Ollie Behrman, as you say, is a little bit of an unknown entity coming into Formula One. We've only seen him once. He was in a Ferrari in Saudi Arabia. Yes, he did incredibly well, but like whether that will transition, we saw Nick de Vries score points in a Williams and then come into Formula One and be absolutely abysmal. You know, it doesn't always just having a one-off race and then turning into an absolute, you know, stalwart of the Formula One grid isn't guaranteed. But I just think, you know, Ollie Behrman and Magnussen versus Ollie Behrman and Hulkenberg as a combo. Like Hulkenberg this season, Magnussen's had some good performances here and there, some controversial performances here and there as well. Like, there's a reason he's on 10 penalty points, and it's having to be a little bit careful as Kevin Magnussen at the moment. But even today, you know, you look at Nico Hulkenberg finishing 6th, Kevin Magnussen finishing 12th, and then they're just not quite there. Who do you see alongside Ollie Behrman in that Haas? Do you think it will be Kevin Magnussen? Do you reckon he'll stay, or just they'll click on?
It's tough. So there were some rumors that this weekend, on like the Thursday, there was a very hush-hush meeting between Ocon and Haas where he signed.
Yep.
Those obviously just rumors, and neither Ocon nor the team have confirmed that. I could see it happening because Ocon clearly wants to stay, and Ocon is quick, but he's also he has an image problem. So there's not many teams who are going to want to take him. Haas also has an image problem, so why not?
Just go in. That's very true. I think that's the only thing with Ocon, isn't it? Like Ocon is clearly very quick, but ask any of his ex-teammates and they will say he's not very nice. Don't know what he does behind the scenes, but
there's lots of fans as well. I feel it's unfortunate, and I do feel bad for him. I do kind of understand it. He gives this kind of atmosphere, and like how he is off track, coupled with being very feisty on track. I understand why he's not popular. I do feel bad for him because I don't think it's entirely warranted. But yeah, talking about Haas seat, I could see it being Ocon. I don't know if I fully believe that rumor. I could see them just keeping Magnussen. If you're going to take a rookie, you want some level of consistency. Obviously, Magnussen knows that car for 3 years now. And he's been around for a long time. He will give that good development feedback, which will not be coming from Behrman's side because he's just trying to learn what Formula One is for half a season. So I could see them sticking there because for consistency reasons. I could see them taking Ocon. I could see them just trying to throw all the cash they've got at Sainz. I don't know if that's enough cash for Sainz.
I think that's the only thing with Haas, isn't it? They are a little strapped for cash when it comes to being able to pay those big bucks. I mean, I think Nico Hulkenberg is like the 3rd or 4th lowest paid driver on the grid, which, considering the performances you're getting out of him, it's ridiculous. But obviously
the points per cash for him must be insane. I didn't know that. I assumed he had a pretty just mid-table salary.
No, so I think the thing with Nico Hulkenberg was just getting back onto the grid, wasn't it? Like, he was a reserve driver for so long. I think he kind of took a little bit of a pay cut to actually just get back in the limelight of Formula One. And I mean, it's paid dividends because he's managed to now secure himself an Audi contract, which I assume is going to have some more zeros behind the numbers for Nico Hulkenberg at Audi. He's got his pay packet for his final stint in Formula One as Nico Hulkenberg there. But
he's the German man in the German team's entry to the sport. Like, he's going to be on every billboard on every road in Germany for like a couple of years, so he's going to see some returns on that. I'm just looking. I think it's a funny point to talk about him having one of the lowest salaries. That is still $2 million a year. So I don't feel too bad for him.
Don't get me wrong. He's not, he's not on the poverty line, is Nico Hulkenberg. But yeah, in comparison, I don't know. Like, I think Kevin Magnussen is even on like 8 or 9 million or something like that. Like, his teammate. And then you've got like the Max Verstappens who are on like 50+ million. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's silly money. Yeah.
You look at Nico Hulkenberg in comparison to that, and I think considering the experience Nico Hulkenberg has, the fact that I think he's only on like 500k more than Logan Sargent, for instance. You know, you're looking at that kind of comparison on the other end of the spectrum, and you're like, okay, I can understand why Nico Hulkenberg took that little bit of a pay packet to maybe move to a Stake Sauber team that isn't going to be great next year. But then, as you say, he's going to be the man at Audi for a good couple of years probably, and that will see him to retirement, you'd imagine, in terms of the money that he's going to pick up. Although on that note,
by Haas picking him up for so cheap. If I had 2 million, I'd definitely pick up a Hulkenberg.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just going to say, like, talking of money in Formula One, Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari, that move coming very, very soon. He's going to be looking at Ferrari, and it was the other way around. Again, at the beginning of the season, it was like, God, Lewis Hamilton must be, biting at the bit to try and get in that Ferrari car. Like, should he have signed for Ferrari a year earlier? The tables have turned. Now it is like, Lewis Hamilton, are you sure you made the right decision going to Ferrari? Like, they are not looking solid all of a sudden. And I know Carlos Sainz finished in 5th, and Charles Leclerc, I said it last weekend after Austria, I don't know what kind of deal he made with some kind of higher up power to win the Monaco Grand Prix, but my goodness
it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it.
He won his home race, and then since then has just been entirely cursed. Every single weekend there is a problem for Leclerc.
Oh, it's not fun. It's not fun in the Leclerc household currently.
No.
Going back to Hamilton, I get the feeling, kind of whatever happens, I get the feeling that Hamilton's not going to be too upset about it. Obviously, when he changed from McLaren to Mercedes, that was a risk because he was, at that point, he knew he was one of the best drivers in the sport.
Yeah.
He was trying to ensure that he had the car underneath him to put up kind of like big numbers. I guess at the time he moved, he had about 25 wins. He was trying to make sure that he could win like a couple championships with whatever team he goes to.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if he wins anything in Ferrari because he's got the most wins of all time, joint most championships of all time. He could win no wins with Ferrari.
Yeah, he's been there, done it, like, as you say, 7 world championships, 104 wins it is now. Like, he's been there, done it.
Yeah. But there are some similarities between this move and his move back in 2013. Obviously, he signed 2 years before a massive new engine regulations came in. Clearly, he was quite good at judging the early engine progress at that time, because obviously he'll have gone on a factory tour of Ferrari, and they would have sat down in loads of meetings and said, "This is our engine development. We're predicting this much horsepower at the start of the season in 2026." He would have compared that to Mercedes, and he made the right call in that comparison last time. I get the feeling he's probably made a pretty good call this time, and Ferrari is going to have a decent engine in 2026. Could be seeing an 8-time world champion.
I mean, well, he's going to have to get past Charles Leclerc, and Charles Leclerc it's not looking great at the moment.
Charles Leclerc in 18th on his Inters.
Yeah, he's I mean, if he's going to move to a team and displace a driver, Charles Leclerc's looking like the one right now. It's just been one of those. But no, I think that's a great point, actually. The fact that, I don't know, though, because, I suppose it's James Vowles, because Williams have kind of been saying, like, we're sticking with Mercedes because we think they're going to have the best engine. But James Vowles, ex-Mercedes, would probably, err on the side of caution. I think James Vowles has also kind of got an eye on Toto Wolff's job eventually. So it's kind of like being in that position.
Yeah, James Vowles obviously is not allowed to say that he thinks Mercedes is going to come out with a dog engine. He's going to be fired immediately if he says that. So he has to say it's looking good. But he says it with some confidence. I do kind of believe him.
Yes.
No one knows.
Yeah, it's impossible.
No one knows the future, right? But all we know is Hamilton chose correctly last time. So he's 1 for 1
this time
predicting engine regulations.
Do you feel like
I'm saying?
That's very true? Even the problem I have is, like, even if Ferrari have the best engine, and at the beginning of the season, it felt like they'd kind of gotten rid of the whole Ferrari clown pit stop etc., tag, at least for a moment. It felt like Fred Vasseur was a bit of fresh air. He'd had a season. It was like, oh, okay, maybe Ferrari are a bit more coherent. They've got this idea, and they're no longer going to be like the panic. I feel like that was the main thing that left Ferrari in the dust a little bit in 2022. Just whenever something was going wrong, they really panicked. And it felt like Vasseur had kind of gotten rid of that until now it's starting to creep back in. I mean, Canada was absolutely abysmal for both drivers. And then you could say similar this weekend for Charles Leclerc, dropping out in Q2, not having the right tyres on at the right times during the race, going for intermediate tyres way too early. Like, he was only running in 8th place. Like, he'd done well to get from 11th up to 8th. And then Ferrari were like, 8th isn't good enough, panic, throw intermediate tyres at him. Oh no, he's 17th, throw softs. Oh no, inters again. And then he ends up in like what could have been 8th place, which, okay, isn't where Charles Leclerc wants to finish, but it's certainly not the 14th place that he ended up finishing miles off the lead. I think he was lapped by the leaders a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, old habits die hard. Like, clearly, Fred Vasseur's had a very positive influence on that team. They've cleaned up that act a lot. Like, this is nowhere near the level of Ferrari buffoonery that we were seeing like 2 years ago, but it is still there. And I would assume part of the reason for that is, we're talking about real people. The team is not some mysterious entity. A team is a collection of people, and largely they will be the same people who are making those god awful decisions a couple of years ago. Obviously, the Vasseur leadership will be trying to shove them aside, teach them like the error of their ways, but it takes a long time. You can't just kick out like a head of strategy and their entire team that easily.
No.
So they are getting there, but it's still the same. It's still the same Ferrari. Yeah, they're learning. They're going on some training courses, but they've got some modules still to do.
Yeah, I feel like that is fair, actually. Maybe a little bit more positive. I feel like Ferrari have broken my heart enough times as a McLaren fan where I do have a little bit of bias towards them. It's like, the fact that like we were looking for that 3rd place in the championship in 2021 and then they just pipped us to it. That does still grate on me a touch. But Ferrari are going to be in the mix, obviously. They're going to be one of the top teams moving into 2026. And I'm sure Charles Leclerc at some point this season will bounce back. Like, he isn't that bad a driver. It's just that so many things have gone against him in recent weekends. And then I suppose at least that has opened the door a little bit. It's kind of talk about those midfield teams. Aston Martin picked up a double points finish. Albon picked up a couple of points. Yuki Tsunoda was in the points because, the Leclerc's, Perez's weren't in there. It was really nice, actually, in Silverstone to see a few battles for those midfield drivers and really points up for grabs for them. Like, I know you did a video recently about what the points totals would look like for Mario Kart, IndyCar, NASCAR, like every different point system that was available. But I do feel like it adds a little bit to a race when you do have an Aston Martin fighting for points with a Williams, with an RB. And even though, yes, it's not for the win, and all of us were watching Hamilton, Verstappen, and Norris for the majority of the time, those drivers at least had good races and were rewarded for those good races. The fact that Logan Sargent finished in 11th and Kevin Magnussen finished in 12th, like, those drivers that finished ahead at least got something to show that they did that little bit better than them.
I mean, yeah. So the first thing, it is great to see. Like, Formula One is always better when you don't know what the result's going to be. I want there to be like a group of about 10 drivers who could get those positions from 8th through to 10th, and it's a proper fight, which is what we've got, which is amazing. It reminds me of my favorite season, 2012, where almost any car could finish in the points, and it is seeming like that now. Like, yeah, Logan Sargent finished 11th. He was 9 seconds behind Tsunoda, but Logan Sargent, regarded as the slowest person out there, if he can finish that close to scoring points, then we have got a spicy season. So it's great to see. I personally, after having done some videos about different point systems, and obviously there's a proposal for next year to have points down to 12th, I would quite like to see that because the sport is so competitive.
Yeah.
And we just really don't have that many retirements nowadays. We had 2 today, and that's kind of what we've come to expect recently. That fight is so tough. Like for Logan Sargent to get that 11th was not easy. He did not accidentally get 11th.
I don't know. Not at all.
So I would like to see some definition now between 11th and 13th. So I'm a big advocate of pushing those points just a little bit further down the grid. I think 12th is a nice cutoff.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to sort of say, where do you think the cutoff might be? Because 12, there's also like some people who say 15. Because it's just like that little bit further down.
I like 12. I like 12 because realistically, you can have 5 or 6 DNFs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
like,
very true.
We have seen races that have that many. I don't want every finisher to get a point. I don't want, let's say, there to be so many DNFs that just by not DNFing, you get 2 points. I don't think that's correct. But the midfield is so competitive. I think a couple more, because I looked at this proposal for next year, and for those who don't know, the proposal is to put points down to 12th, so P12 will get 1 point, and then it's kind of like ticking up from there. So 10th would now be 3 points instead of 1. And it did shift things around. It bumped Hulkenberg, and this is even after only 4 races. It bumped Hulkenberg 3 or 4 places up the championship standings because he had a ton of 11 and 12th places. And that's correct. Like, he has been the best of those midfield drivers. So
deserved. And yeah, I suppose kind of looking at the other side of the coin, you could say, well, Zhou Guanyu finished in 18th place, but was 2 laps down on the lead. And obviously, did he deserve points over, say, George Russell? He ended up retiring.
Zhou Guanyu plus 2 laps should not get points, and I agree with that. So definitely it should not be for every place.
Yeah, down all the way. I don't know where Valtteri was. Valtteri Bottas? Yeah, he must have been lapped because Charles Leclerc was at some point.
It's plus 1 lap,
Yeah.
Just looking at the results.
Yeah, probably. I mean, looking at this race as it stands, 12th place. I think Kevin Magnussen was on the leading lap, just about.
He was 90 seconds behind, which means he was basically just in front of Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton crossed the line just behind Kevin Magnussen.
Yeah, literally.
And fair. I can understand that the 12th position is reasonable. And then the final team to kind of talk about, we haven't mentioned yet, is Alpine. Just a little bit of a non-weekend for them after what was looking like the season had kind of kick-started. They picked up points in Austria, double points finish, 2-3 weekends in a row. It was looking like it was finally clicking. Gasly then took a 50-place grid penalty, which is one of those like weird stats that you see in Formula One sometimes. You're like, okay, so he's starting from 70th on the grid, but that then moved up to 19th because Sergio Perez was starting from the pit lane, although we didn't get to see Gasly start anyway. Just a kind of quick overview on Alpine. How do you feel like they're projecting moving forwards? Have you been surprised by the fact they've kind of come into the fray a little bit more?
I guess I was more surprised by the fact that they were so bad at the start of the season. To go from the 5th best team to like the clear worst team is pretty shocking at the start of the season. I think they're kind of just having like a readjustment to probably where they should be. They're about 6th fastest now, it seems. Obviously, double points in Austria was a good result for them. They look like they're the kind of team they should be getting about 10th each race. Clearly, they just had some massive technical issue at the start of the year, which they couldn't figure out, and then they've figured out. Like, oh, we shouldn't put this brick under the throttle pedal. Let's take that out the car, and oh, we're now 6th fastest again. So it feels like they've kind of just like readjusted to where they should be. But yeah, clearly they have fumbled that momentum a bit because they had a good weekend last weekend. You really want to then just
you want to keep going, don't you? Keep building.
You want to have some quiet weekends, just pick up another point, because then back at the factory you can be like, oh, we got this, guys. Like let's keep our head down. End of the summer break, we can maybe start getting like further into the points. You can't change the PU in Gasly's car and not stick it in the car right, so he doesn't even get to race.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just a big no-no of racing.
Yeah, it was very Alpine, wasn't it? It's like, okay, we're going to take a 50-place grid penalty. We're going to change the entire power unit, and then, as you say, just didn't plug in the gearbox properly. So wasn't even able to start the race.
There is no more Renault thing out there than not attaching, let's say, the gearbox wiring loom. And I would know because I used to work for them.
Oh, really? No way.
Yeah. I used to work for them. Not for the Formula One team.
Just Renault in general, or Alpine
just Renault
in general.
Yeah. They again, old habits die hard, don't they? But I get the feeling the next few races they're going to pick up a few more points. I could see them finishing 8th, 9th, 10th, kind of every now and again now. I think they've readjusted to where they probably should have been and basically where they were at the end of last year.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. Right, to finish up, I do just throw over to the community tab to see if anyone's got some particular questions for you. So this could go one or two ways.
Me.
For you in particular. Do you think the current performances of Sainz, Joe, Bottas, Ricciardo, other drivers unsigned for 2025 have affected their contracts? And which ones of those drivers kind of left do you see staying or going? Not necessarily like where they'll be on the grid, but like, could you see Joe staying, Bottas staying, Ricciardo staying? Kind of a yes or no.
Has it affected their performance?
Like the fact that they haven't got that stability.
Yeah, I think clearly in Sainz's case, it seems to be helping him. That it goes two ways, and some people really thrive when they're out of a contract because it gives them that kind of encouragement. They're like, got to prove myself. And for some people, that really works. Sainz seems to be one of those cases, and he's been just great this year. Hard to judge, honestly, for someone like Zhou Guanyu. We don't really see much of him.
Yeah, he's one of those weird kind of invisible drivers, isn't he?
Yeah, it doesn't help when you are the last, working car to finish. Will they be staying? Sainz, I want to say like 80%, 90% sure, yes. It depends. My only thing is I think he might hold out for a good contract for too long. He might be like holding out for Red Bull to drop Perez or trying to negotiate with Mercedes, something like that, and takes too long. And then there's no more options. And like Williams would just sign someone else.
Yeah, because the other teams are starting to fill up, aren't they? That's the thing. Like Behrman's in Haas now. Williams got Albon. You're starting to see those drivers, even at the back of the grid, accept some contracts. Like Albon was in the discussion with the Mercedes and Red Bulls at the beginning of the season, but has now been like, no, I think I'm just going to sign with Williams and guarantee myself a spot on the grid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, whereas, just like take it off the list and you don't have to worry about it, because clearly some people don't like having that hanging over them. They just want to get it like done with, and then it's like, right, I know what I'm doing. No, I'm doing this year. No, I'm doing next year. So yeah, that's why I'm not 100% sure that Sainz will be there next year, because he might just play the political game of signing a good contract a bit wrong and end up with nothing, and probably take a year out and come back. I would imagine Ricciardo would still be there. He's just so popular that I think someone will take him. Because you hear the stat of like Perez selling 65% of Red Bull merch. I don't think that's true personally, but we do know that Ricciardo sells merch. Like he is a monster on social media. He's potentially the most popular driver there is. I think he'll be somewhere. We've already signed one rookie. We've signed Behrman into the grid, which means we have to lose one of the current 20. If I had to choose anyone, I would probably say Zhou. Because he is just kind of the invisible man. Like, he's not doing anything crazy. He's not like finishing. It's not like he's finishing another lap down behind P17.
Yeah.
He's close enough to Bottas. But for a third-year driver, he's not doing anything special. If I'm Mercedes or if I'm Alpine, I wouldn't be considering him, I don't think. So, I think of anyone, it's going to be him or Ocon are the ones who are not here next year.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. Now you've mentioned that one must go because Behrman is in.
Yeah, one must go.
You kind of put them in that tier list in your head, don't you? Like, okay, yeah, Verstappen, Hamilton, yeah, definitely in top. And then it's like you get to the 18th, 19th, 20th fastest drivers, and you're like, which one of them looks most likely to kind of move out of the way? You mentioned merchandise. Rock Mech asked, what's the idea behind the cargo vroom vroom cap that you're literally wearing right now?
It's an important message to live your life by. You've got love thy neighbor. You've got always wash your hands. You've got cargo vroom vroom, and if you forget it, it's gonna have a massive negative impact on your life. So why not print it on your forehead, and then you'll never forget.
That's very true. I suppose it's one of those things as well. It's like we kind of mentioned it a little bit in the fact that it's just a nice enough piece of merchandise that even if you weren't like car centric or Formula One centric, you'd still be like, oh, it does go vroom vroom. Like, it's just
exactly. Like even before I had a YouTube channel, I've always loved fashion. I had a like a failed attempt with a couple friends to launch like a t-shirt brand when I was like 18. It was clearly a stupid idea. But I've always kind of wanted to make something. And so when I had the opportunity, like when I started to get a YouTube audience, and I had the opportunity to sell some merchandise for that, I wanted to make something that's not just for the channel and still looks nice. I just thought it was funny, basically.
Just funny. And sometimes things just, if they're just funny, that's good enough.
Exactly. I've had people commenting on it, and they're like, often people look at me and they're like, why did your hat say that? And I'm just like, car does go vroom vroom, and then I just walk off.
On that note, mate, I will let you walk off of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I feel like you've added a lot of insight into, you've made me rethink a couple of my, sometimes I do get a little bit partisan. As a McLaren fan, as someone who watches every race from a certain perspective, I do feel like I don't think from certain positions, but definitely. And like, if you haven't seen Mr. V's Garage, you're this side.
You should.
Like, you definitely
great.
should.
I'd recommend it. I watch it all the time.
Is that why your views are so high? It's just you.
It's just me, thousands of times a day. But yeah, if you haven't, Mr. V's Garage on YouTube, you can follow me on Twitter, which I think is samroberts.v. The V is Mr. V.
Does that come from somewhere? I feel like I've missed that. Like, I know your actual name is Sam, but it's just
I know it does. Yes, but it's a very long story, which I'm not going to get into now. It's just my name. That's all you need to know.
No, thank you so much, mate. And then if you want to see more of me, I'm live every single Grand Prix weekend. We're back in a couple of weekends' time. We finally got to the end of this triple header. Little bit of time to breathe. A couple of weeks before Hungary, then into Spa, then a summer break. And I think we all need it at this point. Unless you're Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and you're winning races. We all need a summer break at this point. But thank you again for joining me, mate.